Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for tuning in again this week. We are downloaded in 22 countries. I think I know one person in France that might download us.
I do.
A longtime friend of mine, Fanny Salmon. Welcome to the show. I feel like I start saying welcome back because I see you at racetracks all over the place, including just a couple of weeks ago at the Breeders' Cup. So thank you for coming in.
Well, it's great to be back, and Kentucky is home to me too. It's my second home, and I never feel good if I'm not in Kentucky for too long, and it's always a pleasure to be back. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. I've been listening to the show. Yes, I do listen to the show from France. I've listened to it in Dubai and in other countries. You've been a great travel companion.
Well, thank you. And we worked together in Lexington.
Yes, back in the days.
Years ago, we would get up in the mornings and drive up to the Kentucky Derby and be there all day and then drive back and do the newscasts and then drive back up the next day, 3 or 4 of us.
And edit stories after the newscast, which was so much fun. And every year, Kenny, you would tell me, this is my last Derby, Fanny. And every year, there'd be another one.
I've been saying that for a long time, haven't I? I said, I can't keep doing this.
I do remember the general manager, or was it I think the general manager showing up and saying, "What's this I hear about this Derby special that everybody wants to advertise in?" I think he had no idea what you were doing behind the scenes.
When people would come in, they did not understand the magnitude of the Derby. And, of course, it's even grown more then. Back when we were covering it in the 90s, it was fairly laid back compared to now in terms of the media coverage. And I know you come over for it every year. And what is the Derby, Kentucky Derby compared to for like the ARC Day, the ARC that you cover, or some of the other big races that you cover? Because Fanny is an international horse racing reporter, broadcaster, and she's getting ready to go to Japan. She's been to Hong Kong, all throughout Europe, all throughout the U.S. So with all those qualifications, how does the Derby compare to the Arc de Triomphe for someone, some other race like this?
Well, I think if you had to compare it to another racing event, it would probably be the Melbourne Cup because of the national attention it attracts. And probably also the Galway racing, although Galway in Ireland is far less, it's smaller, and the prize money is not the same. But there's an carnival atmosphere to it. And I remember the first time I went to the Kentucky Derby, you said, "Fanny, young woman of your virtue should not be left alone in the infield after 10 a.m. And it's actually, it's very interesting to cover the infield in the Kentucky Derby, and to a certain extent, that's why it reminds me of the Melbourne Cup Carnival and the crack that the Irish can have at Galway."
Did I give you good advice on that Derby infield, by the way?
Yes, well, I'm French, so I can manage. But no, that's true. I mean, it's not what you would expect to see at some of the other race meetings around the world, that's for sure. But it's fun. It is a lot of fun, and people do enjoy going to the races, and that's what makes it special. And everybody in Kentucky and elsewhere, if you talk about horse racing, they will say, "Have you been to the Kentucky Derby?" Whereas the ARC weekend would be more for racing enthusiasts who are looking at the lines. And it's a bit more like the Breeders' Cup, where you have great races. There's the ARC, of course, but you have the Prix de l'Opera. You have many other races that the people are targeting year-round.
Talking with Fanny Salmon, who is an international reporter for various outlets of horse racing. I see you all over the place. You're on TVG. I see you on Sky. I don't know. What have you missed? You're everywhere.
Well, I've been working with the sales company Arcana in France, which happens to be right next to the house that my great-grandfather built, and that I bought from my grandparents after they passed away, unfortunately. But it's a lot of fun because it's going back to the roots. When I was a teenager, I only dreamed of being able to travel to the races. My grandparents were teachers. They came to Deauville when they were yearlings. And that's what people growing up there would go to the races, and they took me there. But I never I took a fancy to it very early on because it's an exciting sport. I never imagined that it would make me travel. And my teenage crisis was a horse named Triptych.
Triptych, yeah.
Who ran in the Breeders' Cup, and she was twice third in the ARC. She beat the boys in the Guineas in Ireland. But she was up for sale one day after her owner ran into a bit of trouble on the stock market, Alan Clore. And she was sold in a very special sale. It was a triplex. And we're talking 88, I think. And they were selling in Lexington, in Kildare, Ireland, and in Deauville, 3 sister cities, by the way. And my grandfather took me there. I was a teenager, and the whole atmosphere. Nobody was talking by the time she made it to the ring. And after she was sold for a record price in French records, my grandfather took me to Longchamp for the first time to see her. And I remember. After that, she also ran in the Arc, and I remember seeing her disappear after her 3rd run in the Arc, thinking, back then I couldn't go to the stables.
Right.
It wasn't even possible. And I said, one day I will go to Kentucky and I will see you. And I made it to Kentucky. She wasn't around anymore. But now, when they give me my pass and I walk into the stable area on Arc Day, I think of her and how blessed, how grateful I am that this sport has given me so much and given me the chance to travel and meet incredible people, witness incredible horses, and live tremendous experiences.
And Fanny, as far as the racing here in the U.S. compared to Europe, you mentioned Australia, the Far East, is there a thread that runs through there? Other than obviously you got gambling and you want to have a winner, you got winners and losers, but is there some kind of common theme that you've noticed, or is there really a lot of noticeable differences?
I remember a discussion I had with Richard Duchossois once in Arlington, and he said the thoroughbred is a common language. We can speak different languages, we can be in different places. People who have a true love for the thoroughbred, even with their hands, they will be able to understand one another because we have this in common. It's a common thread.
Right.
And you will find, you will meet with people from Japan. I remember being in Dubai soon after the tsunami hit. And I'd never seen a community get together like this. And when I say community, it wasn't about countries. It was about horse people feeling for one another. And the Japanese had actually been traveling while the tsunami had hit, and when they arrived, they didn't know, they hadn't heard from their loved ones, and everybody was pulling together. We only knew a few words of Japanese, but kitsunai, like the human bond, and it's something I will always remember. And when Victoire Pisa won the Dubai World Cup that day, it was the whole racetrack was pulling for them. Sometimes, especially in the climate these days, where people are trying to maybe be more self-centered and within themselves, to be reminded that we have a lot in common with people who may not look like us, but we can share the same feelings and same experiences, and that's what I find magic in our racing world.
Does Fanny Salmon have a favorite racetrack around the country, around the world?
Around the country.
Around the world. I started to say around the country.
Well,
that would be probably like Keeneland because you're back in Kentucky.
Yeah,
Keeneland,
Keeneland,
say Keeneland.
Of course Keeneland, and I'm a adopted Lexingtonian. You know, and it's.
You even root for the Wildcats.
Of course I do.
I'll see your picture sometime. You'll be in France. My friend Fanny Salmon here. We go back years. You'll be in France. We're like this UK outfit. Cheering for a game that's coming on I'm trying to do the 6-hour time difference.
France is easy. Try Singapore.
Yeah, I've seen you. That's right. You were in Singapore with like a 13-hour difference or something?
Yes, and in Dubai too. I mean, there were some times when there was a watching party with Andrew Chesser and Amanda Duckworth, you might know them, and Sean Feld, and I think we woke up the whole ground of the hotel watching the Wildcats beat Notre Dame. That day, and I've cut short some winning parties to just be able to make sure that I can.
What did we do to you when you stopped through Kentucky? What have we done to change you?
I have to say, the first year I thought people were crazy here. You know, Christmas wreath with colors and the whole city dressing blue and white. But I'm one of the crazies now, and I'm proud of it.
You know, and that is a passion that I think horse racing could try to, if they could capture it in other little parts where you'd have like cheering interest, even if you root against, say, your Wildcats or something, at least there's some cheering out there. And I think the human element is something missing in racing. You know, you'll root for Todd Pletcher, you'll root against him. And you know, Todd's great, and I think that's what you want. You'll root for John Calipari or against him, and that creates the passion that creates the interest.
And it's the pump-up videos, we're talking blue and white. I have to talk about Goldikova because I
Goldikova.
followed her for so many years. I was so lucky that the team let me do that, made documentaries. But my sister, when I first told her about Goldikova, she went, "Oh, come on, not again. Last year it was Arkava or See the Stars.
Right.
Every year you come with a horse, and this one has 2 ears, a mane and a tail like everybody else." By the time Goldikova was running in her 4th Breeders' Cup, my sister actually was here.
Yeah.
I saw her. I didn't see her prepare because I was working with HRTV and the World Feed team. She showed up in Goldikova's colors. I was like, who took over my sister's body? But this is, I think, if we pump up, it's we've got to be allowed to be enthusiastic. And I think, the gambling aspect is so important. It's actually funding our industry,
Right.
and we don't want to walk away from it. It's very important, but we need to allow room for these other stories that, get you so excited that people will have dinner with you and they say, "I'm never looking at racing the way I used to, just because of that dinner where you told us about horses." But to go back to your question, because I know we're going to be running out of time, about my favorite race courses around the world, I would have to talk about the 2 race courses in Deauville, because we're a very small city, 5,000 people, but we do have 2 race courses. Galway is very special. And there's one that's very close to my heart too, on the tiny island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. We're talking, way out in the Indian Ocean. It's a 1.2 million people island.
Wow.
And horse racing is their national sport. And the atmosphere that you have on the Champ de Mars in the middle of the capital is incredible. And everybody's following it. I will show up at immigration and people will say, "Hi, Fanny, welcome back. And what's your tip on Saturday?" It's very special.
We're talking with Fanny Salmon, an international correspondent covering racing all over the globe. I don't think anyone has covered more tracks, at least that I know, than Fanny, and we'll talk more with her when we come back on the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for watching us on YouTube. To see Fanny Salmon, if nothing, look at it right there on YouTube if you can see that. Or if you're listening to us, iTunes, Google Play, 93.9. We're proud of the show, that we've had fun and we've had interesting guests, and that's why I'm really thrilled, Fanny, when we saw each other not that long ago at the Breeders' Cup, that you were going to be in the area and we could have you on with us. Because I think it's important to get different perspectives. One of them, as we know we're going through right now in the U.S., is the whole medication issue and all the things at Santa Anita and what's causing what and what's the cause and effect of breeding and everything in between. So I'd like to get your take as someone that lives in France, has covered horse racing literally throughout the world.
And Kentucky. I do
France and Kentucky, yes.
I don't want to lose my green card.
You're bilingual. You are. We would do this interview in French, but I'm a little rusty.
On peut, y a pas de problème.
Yeah, whatever you say. But anyway, you know me.
And now if I get him
Gerard Depardieu. Okay.
Depardieu.
Depardieu.
And how do you call that horse who used to run in the Triple Crown, named after a French king?
Oh, Louis XIV.
Bravo.
Yeah.
See, after all these years, he remembers.
All these years, I remember Louis XIV, yes.
Louis XIV.
Okay, so now, the issue of medication, we always hear, hey, oats water, that's the European way, and that they don't have the breakdowns and they don't have the trouble. Is that accurate enough?
Well, to be honest, the 0 accident factor doesn't happen. It doesn't exist in France. It doesn't exist in other sports.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen ice skaters drop dead from a heart attack. The 0 accident factor does not happen. But do we have more accidents here in the U.S. than we have in other countries? The statistics say so. And we had an accident in Europe on Arc Day. We had a filly who broke down, but it's rare. It's so rare that that it's being more noticed. And I think that the huge difference, and I'm not saying that nobody's going to ever use drugs in Europe or in other countries, but being able to crack down on them means that you have a better feeling for how your horses are doing.
Right.
We've been over this over and over again. Horses cannot come up to us and say, "I'm not feeling good today." They can show us signs, but then if you give them bute and they're not feeling the pain as much, then the signs are going to be so minimal that you're going to miss some. And I think it's very important, and I really agree with what the Breeders' Cup has been doing and the vet checks and scratching horses when we're worried before the race. I think it's important, but we need to make sure that this is not a cosmetic aspect, and we're not just being hypocritical by saying we're going to take these horses out, but we need to make sure that the wear and tear doesn't happen ahead of time. And if the more natural the horses are, the easier it is to be able to keep the worst from happening. I remember I was with Freddie Head last year with Goldie Dream, and she's a filly that I've been seeing, same trainer as Goldie Kova. I know that team a lot, and I love them. And she was never square in her life. She wasn't born square, and they scratched her. Just after Freddie had told me, and we'd watched her canter the day before, and she said, "I've never had her this well." But to the eyes of an American vet who's so used to seeing horses trot a certain way with the certain help that they have most of the time. They've never seen a horse who's naturally not 100% right.
Right.
And I think we need to keep perspective on sometimes horses don't have to look precisely that way even for the sales. I mean, some of the horses that don't pass sales vet turn out to be great runners. But we need to make sure that the number one priority is horses first. And not. I think it's changing a lot already. But I remember, decades ago, hearing the cost of doing business. That's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And we cannot. This is not acceptable. And if we go on with thinking some aspects of it are the cost of doing business, then this business is going to fold.
We had Mike Rapoli on last week, who always has an opinion. I think a very good one too. We've talked, not everybody, but several of us have talked about this on the show before. And Mike made a point about, needing a commissioner here or, some kind of commission that takes care of all U.S. racing. Not the little kingdoms. Everybody's all over the place like they are, Kentucky versus California versus New York versus Florida versus whatever, Louisiana, whatever. Is it more unified in Europe, for example? I mean, even though you're going from not state to state, but country to country, and kind of at least more of a uniformity for what they want?
There is. I know Americans do not like to federate. Everything federal can be scary. There are more unifying bodies in Europe, but also there is an international horse racing federation with very clear standards and goals, and trying to make sure that the rules are the same everywhere. And I think it would be to everybody's benefit. Also for betting, but to make sure that the rules are the same everywhere. And the issue that we have here with racing risking its popularity, it's happening elsewhere as well. It's happening in Australia. It's happening even in France. And we need to make sure that we are able to show every aspect of the industry. Because many times, we need to focus on something. And the focus a lot on TV coverage, which is what I know, has been going back to betting and betting only. And it's very important. Betting
I
is
totally
important.
agree with
we
you on
need
this.
it.
I think
But
it's
we need-
overemphasized.
But
though.
we need to make sure that there is room to tell the other stories, because otherwise people will think that our sport is only about people trying to make money. And they never hear about the many stories and the many people that I know who have slept with their horses in their stall when they're not doing well. Yeah. And this is a big part of our sport. I'm not saying that there are no crooks in the industry. You take every industry, you go to Wall Street, the percentages, you take 100 people in every game, country, community, you're going to have some bad apples. But most of the people I know feel the same as I do about horse racing. They're passionate, and they're passionate about the horses, and they want to put the horses first. And we need to make sure that this is an element that is carried through, and people realize that no, people in the horse business are not just here to use and abuse the horses.
And well put. And, that was always my drive, was to tell the stories, as it still is. And I think that's one of the reasons NBC gets a good number on its Triple Crown and Derby especially, is that we tell a lot of the stories. Yeah, we cover the odds. You know what the odds are going to be.
And they're important.
We have our handicappers. We know what drives the sport. But what I think drives the casual guy out there, the guy sitting in middle America that watches 2-3 horse races a year maybe, is the story. Why do I like this horse? Why do I like this jockey, this trainer? And I hope that that's what we try to do with this show, as you know, is tell the stories and get the human element involved as well.
And it's the why should I care,
Right.
When my sister was asking me about Goldie Kova, what's special about her, well, after 2 half-hour shows, she understood. and that's the thing, you cover the Olympics, and these stories on the Olympic coverage are so important. It's a sport that you don't know, and who Who cares? You just watch this feature and you're not going to go for a restroom run because you want to make sure that you know what happens to this guy that you just found out about.
See, I say go to the loo here.
Okay. Yeah.
Fanny, I can't thank you enough for
Well,
being on.
It's a pleasure.
And you'll be off to Japan soon and
I'm going
traveling
first
the world
back
again.
to France to the November sales, the autumn sales in Arcana, where we're going to sell some out of training horses and broodmares and prospects and horses for national hunt. And then I'm off to Japan, where actually we have a Frenchman, Christophe Lemaire, who's leading the jockey rankings. He was the champion last year, and we're hoping that he's going to do again this year. And,
Fanny, thank you for being with us.
it's a pleasure, Kenny. À bientôt.
Fanny Salmon is with us, a great friend, international correspondent for horse racing, great ambassador for the sport as well. More coming up on the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us.